Hello and good morning, everybody. It's me, Julian. Today I'd like to continue my short series of reflections, personal reflections, on what it means to do meaningful work and how to find something that sustains and animates you throughout your life, how to give your life purpose, as it were, and the various ways in which intellectual pursuits and creative pursuits can actually create quite a meaningful life. It's a seemingly simple and yet highly important question that everyone has to ask themselves at one point, which is, how do you live? And what is it that you find important, and what is it that you would like to dedicate your time on this planet towards doing? And today I would like to offer a little reading, a reflection from a biography of Roger Penrose, the Nobel laureate British physicist, called The Impossible Man. And there's a wonderful passage, it's a lecture that Roger gives, in which he talks about the pleasure one feels because one is searching for truth. And he's basically making an argument that there's a certain beauty, satisfaction, that comes from doing something for the sake of doing it. Which isn't to say that you're just doing it for your own satisfaction. Like, for example, if you're engaged in mathematical problems, ideally, you would want to solve one of them or introduce a new problem and share them with your peers and move the science forward. And yet, at the same time, there's something delicious about just working on the problem itself. In fact, Roger Penrose goes as far as saying there's a certain aesthetic appeal, the beautiful simplicity, if you will, when an idea suddenly occurs to you, a solution comes to you in a new way. In fact, one of his lifelong obsessions has been, how do I come to this moment? Like, you could be spending your entire career working on a seemingly insoluble problem, or insolvable problem. And then one day you're crossing the road, as Roger Penrose did. And within an instant, like, this world-changing idea suddenly comes to you. Or another famous incident is like, this is shortly after the Kennedy assassination, and he's on a road trip. And his partner is driving, one of his colleagues is driving, and the colleague doesn't speak. And so during that drive, Penrose enters into a kind of flow state where he suddenly actually has one of his most important ideas. You can actually see an image here of the Penrose tiling, which is another one of those ideas that just came to him because he didn't want to work on something else, like it was a procrastination. But anyway, I'm going to read to you this passage where Roger Penrose talks about the beauty of doing something for the pleasure of it and how important that is to scientific progress. He writes, "One often becomes fascinated by a problem, even although it has no particular relevance to things one may be doing. And when one is fascinated, the internal aesthetics of the thing will drive it along. Sometimes it turns out that what one has been doing can be used for something else, but sometimes not at all. That is one of the nicest things about mathematics. So often, it must be the case that people just do things for their own sake, merely for the enjoyment of doing them. And this enables progress to be made that could not be made otherwise." And what I find so important about that passage is that he says that there are certain types of progress that can only be made when you enjoy what you're doing. In fact, there's actually a slightly more radical implication to this argument in Penrosian fashion. He's almost arguing that the universe has a certain aesthetic quality, that it encourages us to play and think creatively. That sometimes the only way to solve one problem is to be working on something else. That our mind can never really access the thing directly. And I find that a very powerful idea. Like, it's not even about saying that you should do things for the sake of doing them. It's that the way we process ideas can come in unexpected ways. Like, I really enjoy puzzling, and I always find myself amazed how quickly my brain, I'm not trying to brag here because I'm terrible at puzzles, but how when I first sit down, my brain can almost scan all the pieces and pick two of them out that fit, almost magically. And then I run out of that focus very quickly. I can only do it for short bursts at a time. And then I'll go back to it and my brain can make these connections. And I think to myself that when you're studying and working, your brain is constantly doing things like this. Like, I'm not a neurologist, but I think that there's something to be said about the way in which ideas click or come together. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that in my own life, I've noticed that reading enables this process. Like, behind me, you can see some books that I just picked up here in London. Like, the first one is like Saki, like little comedic vignettes about the British aristocracy. And then behind it, it's Edward Said on music, Roberto Calasso, Italo Calvino, Saramago. These are texts that deal with very different things, but I find that when I'm working on one idea or one problem and I read the texts together, they spark new ideas. And the almost magical part is that sometimes it feels like this idea could only ever have come to me by reading these texts together, by cross-referencing Saramago with, I don't know, Proust or whatever. And if I had been reading a different constellation of texts, something very different would have emerged. It's like a certain contingency, a certain playfulness, a magic quality of having your brain interact with the substance of life and thought. And so whether it's in mathematics or geometry or literature, I think that it's not just about flow state, it's about creating a certain openness towards doing things that don't seem to have a purpose. Like, I'm not reading these books because I am going to sit an exam on them. I'm reading them because I'm curious what types of ideas will flow from and through them. When I go for a walk or work on a puzzle, it's something that I'm doing because I want to let my mind just drift a little bit. And I think especially in a world where we're so easily distracted with constant low-level stimuli and increasingly intense stimuli, it can be very difficult to let these processes happen naturally. You almost have to create occasions for them, occasions to let those processes take place and take root in your mind. And I think if you're a student, for example, or you're working on something, you'll find that often when you step away from it, you can actually have your most important thoughts. And to loop back to Penrose, Penrose is also suggesting that there is an aesthetic quality to solutions. Like, think about woodworking, how there are certain ways that the wood can be joined together that just feels right. There are certain numbers that feel right to us. There's an almost magical quality of solutions assuming an aesthetic appeal to us. Something that Goethe was already very interested in, the German Romantics were also exploring. And I don't mean to be mystical about this. That's not my inclination. But I do think that it's important that you open yourself up as much as possible to as many different things as possible. Like, I love going either to a classical music concert or listening to one at home. You can live stream them because there's something about when you listen to a Beethoven piece or Schubert, my personal favorite, and the piano is just constantly building these motifs and deconstructing them and finding new ideas in them that mimics the way I think the brain is seeking patterns and ideas. And sometimes I'll find myself thinking new thoughts during the concert or afterwards. And so I hesitate to give you any form of advice, but what's worked for me is to create occasions for this type of reflection to take place, to read new and unexpected things, to watch things that I hadn't heard of, to listen to more music, to let it come together, to have an antenna sticking out of your head that picks up these wavelengths, as it were. And allowing that to feed into a certain creativity, but also to feel confident, perhaps, that this is the stuff of life. This is what life is for, what it is about. One of the privileges of being a human being is that you can surf this wave, if you will. And that's the idea that I'd like to share with you today, that one of the ways I think to find purpose and meaning in your pursuits, intellectual, creative, etc., is to let them feed into each other and to enjoy the accidental, as it were, process by which you can have sudden, profound, meaningful insights that seem to come out of nowhere, but were really the process of a long-standing fermentation of various creative and intellectual pursuits. That would be my advice to you. Don't worry about wasting time. Instead, do a little bit of everything. Allow yourself to find new ways of seeing the world. And perhaps that's what life is about. thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoy this format. It's a little bit different, but I really enjoy doing it. And so hopefully this is also of value to you. If you'd like to go a little bit further in your learning and be a part of our learning community, I do invite you to take a look at my Patreon or my short form videos on Instagram, which are free, and my Substack, which is also free. And I also post a bonus audio discussion where I share reading recommendations if you want to read more widely. And yeah, this is meant as an invitation to that life, to that world, which was once called the life of the mind. See you soon.